I'm a teacher of 20 years with the DOE at our public intermediate school in 5 different public schools. I'm asking this board to support the schools our keiki deserve, and I speak here as both a special education and ELL inclusion teacher. Teachers of special education and English language learners are overworked and have terrible amounts of stress. There is no limit on the number of students every teacher must take and monitor. It's bad enough that we have to teach 60 to 100 students in our regular classes and then be asked to monitor another 20. And monitoring means that we must follow them all through the school year. We must talk to all of the regular ed teachers. We must write reports on them. We must counsel the students. It is a very long, hard role that we must play. One of our special ed teachers, actually more than one, 4 of our special ed teachers quit within a 2-year period. Some left in the middle of a quarter, 2 left in the middle of a week, leaving their parents and their students stranded. Last year, my special education inclusion teacher left on medical leave for 7 months, leaving me to do all the work that she could left behind, because the only people that replaced her was a parade of 12 unqualified substitutes who knew nothing about special education and basically didn't care much about our kids. It almost made me quit. So I'm asking this board, please, support the schools our keiki deserve for our special education teachers and their students, and our English language learners and their students. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Tong? Thank you.
Next testifier is Justin Huey.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for putting this on your agenda. My name is Justin Huey. I'm a 2nd grade special ed teacher at King Kamehameha, the 3rd Elementary in Lahaina, and the Vice President of HSTA. I'm asking for the board to support the schools our keiki deserve bill, and I'm going to focus on the special education part of it. In February 2012, I found out from a DOE employee that the DOE had changed the staffing formula from a weighted formula to a proportional formula. I went up the chain of command from my principal to the CAS, finally to the DES Lois Sato, asking what the new formula was. Everyone either didn't know or was giving me the runaround. March 2012, I asked Lois for the details of the new formula, and she told me to take off my HSTA hat and let HSTA leadership do their job. After losing an Article 6 position, special ed position, an EA, the general education teachers were getting upset with the special education teachers for obvious lack of servicing, and that wasn't fair. It wasn't their fault. I sent multiple emails to district and had the DES come to look at every IEP at my school. They concluded I was correct and the school could not fill out the minutes in the IEPs, and then insinuated to me that I needed to change my IEP so the school would be in compliance. She started yelling at me, and I filed a safe workplace complaint and received an apology. The old system was a weighted formula that took into account the student needs in regards to staffing. The new proportional formula, the student needs are irrelevant. The money is just divided up by district without any regard to need. A student with a mild disability and an autistic student are counted the same. And the district has the freedom to send as many positions to any school they like, although when I sent emails to Lois Sato on Maui stating that we could not fill the minutes, she told me in Lotus Notes this is usually addressed by administrators. 2010, WestEd was contracted by the DOE to conduct a review of the special education program and process. I was concerned the DOE spending $500,000 for WestEd to give them the justification of the formula they had already put in place. 2011, HSTA sends an email to the DOE requesting for the new formula to be suspended because it did not change without consent and confer with HSTA, the Board of Ed, and the Committee on Weights. 2013, I emailed testimony to this board and was asking for several legislators about this. They all received a breakdown in positions from all the way back to school year 2010, and reassured that the DOE reassured that there would be no cuts in staffing with the new formula. But what the DOE wasn't saying was that it didn't show the discrepancy until 2008 to 2011, which was a cut of 261.12 positions statewide. HSTA conducted a survey, 3 questions on there. Are you confident you can meet the SPED minutes required on your service grid for your caseload? 39% said no. Do you feel you are currently receiving the appropriate amount of support services and workload support for your administrator in regards to your SPED caseload? 61% said no. With the loss of the 1690 SPED funds, how did it impact student services? 78% responded with an increased teacher workload in order to replace appropriate training materials. In an article called "Is Hawaii Failing Its Special Education Students?" it referenced not filling the current positions. I see the problem as much worse because the current formula is not providing adequate positions to be filled. This state needs to have a special education staffing formula that is adequate based upon the needs of the individual IEPs, and is imperative that teachers are involved in a process of establishing an adequate formula. We should be able to solve this problem together without another billion-dollar lawsuit. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Huey? Thank you.
Next testifier is Mitzi Higo.
Good afternoon, Ms. Higo.
Mitzi Higa, Mackay Middle School. I'm going to speak on class size for schools our Keiki deserve. It's one of the things that we addressed because it is one that is research. They're all research-based, but this is one that has proven effective for raising student achievement, is lowering class size. Right now, although we have some limits within K2, we have no maximum class size for 3 all the way to 12. Our class sizes are becoming enormous, and with that comes teachers are less able to attend to the needs of special ed students that are in inclusion classrooms. Even our special ed resource classrooms that are just special ed are increasing, and teachers are not able to give the type of attention that's needed on the small details. So if, let's say it's secondary, which I'm at now, middle school, one teacher might have 150 students as a caseload. Now, if they all have essays, they have all these assignments, so they're correcting, they're giving feedback. But on top of that, there's some students who need extra supports. So they have to have time to plan for those extra supports. So the more that their class size increases, the more difficult this becomes. And unfortunately at my school, we're having a high turnover, not as high as Campbell High School. If you want to look at turnover rates, that's really high. And their class size can be like 40 students to a class. At my school, although you'll see on the web, or DOE site, you'll see a ratio, right? But when they say the ratio, let's say they say it's 18-to-1 in a school. What they're really doing is when they calculate that number, it's not just classroom teachers with students, they're counting all teachers at the school. Now, I'm a teacher that's outside the classroom right now, so I'm a curriculum coordinator, but my number is counted in that ratio. I don't have a classroom, I help other teachers. So the counselors are counted, the student activities coordinator, the school service coordinator, student services coordinator, the registrar, they're all in that ratio. So that isn't an accurate class number that you're seeing on the website. Class size, I'm talking about what's on the roster. So for my teachers, you can look at Eva Mackay and it's going to be low. But if you look at the actual rosters, it's 32 and up per class. This is high for what they do, inclusion classrooms included. And so what we need is lower class size. That's part of our schools our Keiki deserve. And we really need to fix this problem and get some maximum class size. We're recommending, we looked at board policy, and you have a 26 ratio, or a 26 class size that you recommend for grades 3 up to 12. And you have 20 for under. That's what we wrote into our schools our Keiki deserve. We looked at your recommendations, and that's what we want to support. So we hope you'll join us in this cause. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Higo? Thank you.
Next testifier is Muriel Ellsworth.
Good afternoon.
Hello, my name is actually Mireille Ellsworth. I'm used to the mispronunciation, no problem. And I've been a teacher at YK High School for nearly 12 years. Came all the way from the Big Island today to speak with you, and I appreciate the opportunity. I'm speaking in support of the schools our Keiki deserve, and I'd like to focus on the expansion of vocational education programs, also known as CTE, Career and Technical Education. I really believe in creating more opportunities for the students to learn a trade in high school, or at least try their hand at a trade, and something that would lead to careers other than, that might not necessarily require college education. And I know that there's been this big campaign and push in our state for the 55% college graduates by the year 2025. But when I did my own research, I actually found that the state of Hawaii has its own projections from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and they don't really match up with some of the things that have been used for that campaign. So really what they're saying is 30% of jobs projected for 2022 would require a college degree, and that includes 2-year degrees, not just 4-year or higher. So I really trust these statistics because this is our own state who's seen the trends over time and has, this is their main thing that they focus on year after year. So I would really like to, focus on expanding the programs because in Hilo, it's lucky for our school, Waikea High School, we have some pretty good programs. But our neighboring rival high school, actually, Hilo High, they've had a big reduction in their vocational education programs, and it's just not good for the students. It's not in their best interest. We don't want kids going to college, and maybe that's not really what they wanted to do, but they're kind of being brainwashed in this way that everyone has to be college and career ready, but the career part is really losing translation and not really reaching the schools. In my school, everybody is being pushed and geared toward the whole curriculum, and everything is being pushed for college ready. And the career aspect is just sort of going on the wayside. So rather than have kids go to college and maybe incur debt that, is unnecessary because that's not really their path, I would really encourage that we would support schools our Keiki deserve in the vocational education expansion. That's what we really need. We need people to fix our cars, electricians, people to build houses and such. And we want them to be qualified and skilled. So we don't want to just put this on the wayside. We won't get to work without it. So thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Ellsworth? Okay, thank you.
Next testifier is Jessica Whitsett.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, members of the board. My name is Jessica Whitsett. I teach 4th grade at Maili Elementary on the leeward coast of Oahu. This is my 2nd year teaching in Hawaii. Before that, I taught in California public schools. I am here today to speak in strong support of the Schools Our Keiki Deserve campaign. I'd like to specifically address school facilities. You may have heard before that the average age of a school in Hawaii is 65 years old. I wanted to talk about the school where I work. When I first arrived there, I was shocked coming from the school that I taught at before. The buildings are outdated, the classrooms are dusty, the desks in my room look very beat up. I teach in a portable classroom. It was meant to be a temporary classroom, and it's been at my school for 45 years. The first day that it rained this school year, in the corner of the classroom, the water started streaming in, and it was the corner of the room where I had my instructional bulletin boards and student work. So the student work got rain streaks and was ruined, and you can imagine how a 4th grader feels about that. There's cracks under the doors and the windows, so much dust comes in, it's very difficult to keep our books clean. We're really lucky to have one-to-one computers in our classroom, but again, they're so dusty, it's difficult to keep them in working order. I'm here today to ask for your support. I know that there's many classrooms in this condition. I know there's many teachers across the state that sadly could tell a similar story. I teach out in Waianae where my students face a lot of obstacles to their school success. I work every day to help them believe in themselves and to show them that they matter, but being in a dusty classroom where we get rained on doesn't make us feel like we matter. So our teachers need your support and our Keiki need your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Whitsett? Thank you.
Next testifier is Debbie Anderson.
Good afternoon.
Hello, Madam Chair, members of the board. I'm Debbie Anderson, 25-year DOE veteran. Half a dozen of those as a nationally board certified library media specialist. I don't see Ms. Cox, but we had worked in 2009. I became the co-chair of the senior project for the state of Hawaii. Since then, I started a national task force with the American Association of School Libraries, and we're now working with the ACRL to make a position of trying to support project-based learning across the entire curriculum at exiting portfolio grades 5, 8, 12, and of course for undergraduate. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about empowerment. I know you've probably heard about the EIH Institute going around, and I think one of the things we want to mention is that we want to develop better models of mentoring for teachers. We have a window of opportunity under the ESSA to do a better job of developing teacher leaders. When you look back at the Hawaii Commission on Teachers in America's Future, there were wonderful opportunities suggested with National Board, et cetera. But we know that 70% of new teachers have no experience. They usually need about 4 to 5 years to become effective, and yet 40% of them are leaving in that first 5 years. So developing a much better system of mentoring like they have in the state of Illinois and budgeting toward increasing that could be making a very big difference, and also helping to develop a career ladder. After 3 years, teachers can work on becoming an accomplished teacher and go from there. The students who suffer the most without having the highest quality teachers available are the over 8,500 who attend hard-to-fill schools. 1/6 of our schools in Hawaii are rural. And the weighted student formula had an intention of trying to have a more equitable system. Unfortunately, there were unintended consequences. So when the DOE commissioned the report from the American Institutes of Research, they basically said that we have a whole bunch of different pieces that we need to improve in support for trying to help our most neediest of schools. One example is that there needs to be some basic operations that are equivalent at every school, such as essential personnel. I can't help but mention, as a school librarian for 15 years, that Windward, Oahu, 97% of the schools have a school library with a certified librarian. On the Big Island, it is less than 30%. And we're trying to talk about how we're developing people who are college and career ready. What if they go off to college and this child from Ka'u on the Big Island has never, ever in their K-12 experience walked into a school library where there was a school librarian? This is not college and career readiness. So we need to make some changes. We believe that we can make a difference by implementing some of the components of the schools our Keiki deserve. And we thank you so much for listening to us today. Mahalo.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Anderson? Okay. Thank you.
Next testifier is Mikhail Nowitzki.
Very close.
Good afternoon.
Hello, Chair. Board. My name is Michał Nowicki, like Michał to Dougie. And I am a teacher at I'm a teacher at the University Laboratory School. I'm also a former student of Dr. Halagao at UH. And I'd like to speak in support of schools our Keiki deserve, and particularly talk a little bit about my own observations and my experience that has to do with teacher retention and recruitment, which I feel is a very big issue in our schools in Hawaii. I first started teaching 8 years ago, and I taught at Waikato High School for 3 years. And I remember my second year, I was asked to put together a French program and teach French language and literature. And that was bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and I said, okay, let's do it. And I went to, and of course, we had no resources, so I went to Honolulu High School, and I went to Pearl City High School, and I grabbed some books from the teachers who were about to discard them. And we started a French program. The second year, we got moved to a different classroom. I remember we were teaching a double portable, and behind the 6-foot-tall wall in that portable, students were learning Ilocano, and they were chanting their songs to the tune of Farrington Highway, just like 25 feet over. And I was trying to work in French conjugations, and it was challenging. We did have a lot of fun. That was my third year at the school, and then I was trying to talk to the administration and figure out a way that I could be able to carry with me my projector that I bought using my own money, and the set of speakers I got using a grant, and set of visual dictionaries I wrote another grant for, because all I had was a classroom set. And just the solutions were in there, and when I came back to teach for a fourth year, I was handed 6 different sets of keys to 6 different classrooms. Waipahu High School, very big campus. I said, there's no way I can make it in time from one corner to the other. We hit that wall. I'm sorry, and I apologize to my students, and I said I can't do it, and I can't teach under in these conditions, in that productive, and it's not respectful for the students to be learning in those conditions. I went on Craigslist because I needed a job, and I landed a job at the University Laboratory School because that's how desperate they were to hire a math teacher at that time. And the University Laboratory School is a school that does extremely well, and it's one of the highest performing public schools, if not the highest performing public school in the state. That the fact that I was able to go on Craigslist and see an ad for a job at this school and last minute get it was absolutely mind-blowing to me. I fell in love with it. We had caps and class sizes, we have whole child education, we have time to plan our lessons, and it's absolutely amazing. And this is my 5th year at the school now. I feel very blessed and privileged to be working at the school. However, we still face some of the same issues that a lot of public schools face in terms of facilities that are run down, in terms of teacher salaries that seem to be at a standstill. I looked at some of the statistics in Hawaii. A teacher who has 10 years of experience earns 9% more than a teacher who just started. The national average is 28%. In a state like Rhode Island, a teacher with 10 years of experience makes 80% more than a teacher who just started. At this rate, I'd be better off flying up to Dubai for 2 years and collecting sacks of cash, coming back to Hawaii to do it. But this is not. But I don't think that that's the solution. I think that this is what a lot of creative young teachers who move past the first 3 years that are really challenging. Those are the decisions they face, and the most creative teachers out there, they look at different opportunities. Two of my friends at lab school left. One is teaching at the Iolani this year. One is working at Carl Smith and Ball. Another friend who taught the Waipahu for 9 years is teaching at Carl Smith and Ball, is practicing law at Carl Smith and Ball downtown. Another teacher who worked at the Wailua High School is working at the Iolani this year. Those are all excellent teachers who can put 2 and 2 together and say, I can't work like this. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Nowitzki? Okay, thank you for that enlightening and entertaining.
When I decided to become a teacher, my father told me, well, you chose to be a teacher, now please choose to marry rich. I'm still single.
More information than we needed.
Next testifier is Shirley Yamauchi.
I'm not as funny as Mihao.
You got a hard act to follow.
Mine's much more depressing, but that was very funny, Mihao. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of the committee. My name is Shirley Yamauchi, and I'm the head faculty rep for HST at Kapolei Middle School and Leeward Board of Directors. I'm a 41-year resident of the state of Hawaii, a graduate of Pahoa Schools on the Big Island, which is once a zone school. And I've been at Copley Middle School since August of 2000, and just want to share some of my personal and financial difficulties of being a public school educator here in Hawaii. I dropped out of 2 master's degree programs offered by the University of Hawaii because I was unable to afford my continuing education there. I'm not eligible for WIC. I have an 11-month-old son. I sometimes buy questionable baby formula from strangers that I meet online, and I meet up with them in parking lots. It looks very questionable. Every month, I charge my groceries at Target Kapolei to get to the second teacher paycheck of the month to the 20th. My aging widowed mother lives in Japan, and I have not seen her since May of 2005. She has also not met her grandson. From New Year's Eve 2004 till June 2012, I worked at Ala Moana as a cashier and stock girl for a New York designer. The store has closed down since then, and I am unable to find part-time work that understands Kapolei Middle School's multi-track calendar, where I go on vacation after every 6 weeks of teaching. I go on a 3-week vacation. Also, in addition to my grading of papers and other work-related preparations past our contractual 3 p.m. work day, I offer free tutorial to my students every morning till 8:15 and first recess. And sometimes at the middle school, I'm there till 5 p.m., which is an 11-hour work day. And then I go to my home in Makakilo and I continue on. I'm a registered voter of our state, so I work at the Kapolei High School polling site for both the primary and general elections in 2012 and 2015. For each election, I was paid $85. I've also worked as an extra on Hawaii Five-0, Jurassic, the recent movie, and Godzilla. And I wait for extra roles. I'm a Japanese tourist in Jurassic. I'm waiting for the jumbo sphere ride thing. You'll see me. I'm wearing a yellow dress. That was my funny line. The previous year at Copley Middle School, one year we lost 14 teachers, and our admin was forced to bring in 14 new hires. These teachers left forever, and parents' demands were not met. People quickly say things like, why don't you just move to the mainland? Why don't you go to Las Vegas? But Hawaii's always been my home. My dad's parents immigrated to Hawaii at the turn of the 20th century to Pahoa, Big Island. My mother immigrated to the Big Island in 1971. 2 of my cousins on my dad's side left. They were educators. They left for State Farm, like a good neighbor. State Farm is there. And once I thought about moving to Washington, to South Whidbey School District, number 206. This was in 2013. But Hawaii is my home, and I chose to stay here. And if I left, my administrator would have to locate another highly qualified language arts teacher. I'm almost done. My principal said that we were depleted in language arts teachers. Last school year, I took 91 sick days off, and my principal Nagua, was not able to find a replacement teacher for me, and eventually started calling in for mainland hires and still could not find a teacher. So I ask you, please support School Our Keiki Deserves and support our local teachers here in the state of Hawaii. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Yamaguchi? Okay, thank you.
Next testifier is Andy Jones.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name's Andy Jones. I'm a language arts teacher at Radford High School. I'd like to speak with you for a couple of minutes on the 8th point of Schools Our Keiki Deserve, which is the standardized testing. Standardized testing is a huge issue, and I want to talk specifically about my role as an 11th grade language arts teacher who has prepped my juniors for the Smarter Balanced assessment last year during the first year that we were doing it in 11th grade, and this year. Three aspects of the Smarter Balanced assessment that I'd like to bring up. First is the amount of time that it drains from the school year. When all was over, by the end of the school year, I came up with a little formula to calculate how much time I had spent on Smarter Balanced assessment preparation, and I estimated it was about 1/7 of the school year. I think that most teachers would agree that spending that much time on a test is simply too much time. While we all have this saying that we're not supposed to be teaching to the test, the fact of the matter is It becomes a school project, a general agreement among administrators, curriculum coordinators, complex area superintendents, teachers, etc., that we're all going to do as well as we can on these tests, and that's what happens is that you spend up, you use up a seventh of your school year teaching to a test. The second aspect I would like to mention is just the negative impact that standardized testing has, and I think it differs very much from school to school, grade level to grade level. It depends very much on the particular school demographic, exactly what the negative impact of standardized testing is. And this is also bound up with the whole Strive High ranking, which I think is also extremely unhealthy. You know, I found, I'm a very competitive person. I'm competitive as a teacher. And then what I find myself doing at the end of the school year is when I see the Strive High rankings, I see that schools within a relatively similar socioeconomic demographic, such as Pearl City or Roosevelt, are doing better than Radford is on the Smarter Balance assessment. And then I start scheming. How do I prepare my kids better for this test next year? And but then I pull back. I've been teaching for 20 years, and I say, that's not right. I mean, that's not proper teaching. It's unhealthy. Schools should be collaborative rather than competitive with each other. Third and finally, just my own professional judgment as a language arts teacher, as well as a person who was on the state managed item writing committee. In fact, I sat here and got my assessment writing training 2 years ago. It's a mediocre assessment. It's a mediocre test. And I think if we could, there's been a lot of talk, for instance, about switching to the ACT, so that's something I'd very much like to support. Even better would be if gradually we could move to some sort of a performance assessment. That would be wonderful. Finally, somebody, I don't know if it was you, Mrs. Halaugal, last night, who mentioned at the Common Cause meeting downtown, it was a very nice meeting. Iolani, there are no standardized tests there. Punahou, no standardized tests. No standardized tests in Finland. I believe that standardized testing right now is our single biggest obstacle to school improvement, in addition to raising teacher salaries so that people want to stay in the field for more than 5 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Jones, Board Member Horner has a question for you.
Yes.
Apologies, Chair, I know we're short on time, but just corporate education with a 20-year veteran in language arts. So I fully understand, as a trustee at ELI for quite a few years, what you're saying in regards to standardized tests, but just for education, because you were involved in the curriculum development, I guess, and the testing tools. So are you saying that there's a misalignment between what you would normally be teaching and what you're teaching to the test? I don't understand. The theory would be you're teaching things.
It changes curriculum. Yes, it changes the curriculum because the Smarter Balanced assessment, the language arts portion of this assessment consists of reading comprehension and then what is known as a performance task. And the performance task is essentially writing an essay related to a topic where students are asked to read several documents and then put together an essay, an argumentative essay in response to the documents. And as a performance test, the Smarter Balance, this particular performance task is based on far higher quality tests, such as the AP language synthesis question, which is of a much higher quality. So it's a dumbed down version of stronger performance assessments that pre-existed the Smarter Balanced assessment. And just when you have something like that, and it is non-high stakes for students, but it's high stakes for schools and teachers, meaning that there are negative repercussions based on what our Strive High ranking is and so on and so forth. Yes, it does become, it does end up determining what you're teaching. And there are just many better things that we could be teaching other than this particular set of tasks.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you.
Next testifier is Lisa Momsen.
Good afternoon.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I can read. Thank you. This is my first board meeting. I'm Lisa Morrison, and I flew over today from Maui to speak, so I really appreciate the opportunity to be heard. I teach at Maui Waina Intermediate School, and I'm an 8th grade teacher. Nationwide, 8th grade is the most tested grade level that we have. That's a dubious honor. I'm concerned because I see at my school teachers fleeing language arts and math teaching because of the pressure to do test prep and use canned curriculum and produce scores that not only we are judged by, but also fellow teachers who do not teach in those subjects. We had 2 language arts teachers last year who took the opportunity to leave and teach electives instead. One math teacher who this next year will be leaving math for social studies because it's not a tested subject. But we also last month had 2 language arts teachers quit in 1 week. And my concern is that rather than ensuring quality instruction, which was the empty promise that standardized testing was supposed to do for us with accountability, toxic testing is resulting in instability in these subjects. And instead, we're putting inexperienced teachers in those positions. I'm a trader myself. I taught math for 3 years, and now I am the student activities coordinator at my school. I get to teach electives where I have academic freedom to create the curriculum that I think the students would benefit from, and I get to have fun with the students. However, whenever I'm going to do an on-campus activity or a field trip, the first thing I have to do is pull out the massive testing schedule, the big matrix that shows when everything is happening, and make sure that it's not going to conflict with testing. It permeates everything. In the 3 years that I taught math, we had 3 different tests: the HSA, the Bridge HSA, and then SPED. A lot of change, and it was disappointing to see that we moved from the HSA, which at least my students felt somewhat successful at that, to the Smarter Balance Assessment, which is so flawed and so developmentally inappropriate. It leaves my students feeling like failures, and that's without having their scores, because we don't get the scores while we still have the students. They don't come in until after the students are already gone. I can't use them for any kind of formative assessment at all. I cannot help those students based on the information that comes from that test. And what I have handed out shows that Hawaii is spending $107 per student per year simply on testing. At my own school, that's $120,000 a year. I don't feel that we are recouping any value for students, parents, teachers, and our community with that money. And this is a list we don't want to be at the top of. And so, thank you very much. I hope that we can come up with a solution. I know that you have the power to change this, and thanks very much for hearing me out.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Morrison? Okay, thank you.
Raina Whitney.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. It's actually Raina Whiting, but thank you. You're doing a wonderful job. So my name is Raina Whiting. I'm a kindergarten teacher on the Big Island of Hawaii at Na'alehu Elementary School. And I'd like to thank the board for allowing me to speak today because I live 2 hours from an airport on the Big Island, so it's quite a long journey to get here. And for me, being here today is incredibly important. I'm very thankful for being here, and even though it's a long journey for me to get here, I'm very, very happy that I am. It's important in moving school improvement ideas forward to listen to teachers, so again, that's why I'm here. I know many of my fellow Big Island teachers feel really disconnected to this process, so being here to submit testimony is an important piece. So, yeah. Today I'm in strong support of schools our Keiki deserve, and I'm here today to ask for your support as well. In the November 15th Honolulu Advertiser editorial piece, Mrs. Palagao makes a call to teachers who are able to report their concerns, and that really means a lot to me. I agree with her that the school improvement will require a diverse group of parties, but I feel particularly that the voice of teachers are incredibly valuable, if not the most valuable, to move forward. Teachers are the people that are physically and emotionally there for Hawaii's Keiki every day of the school year, myself included. So I applaud the board for allowing myself and the others who have just testified and the ones that will testify after me for giving us the space and time to begin to voice our concerns. And I believe that this is the first step that we can take together. And I'm hopeful that as we move forward, we can begin to discuss a working group around the ideas of the schools our Keiki deserve. And these are all really great ideas, the 10 points of the schools our Keiki deserve. And they could all have a really immense positive impact on our schools and our students. So I feel that the board and teachers like me should be natural partners in school improvement, and my hope is that members of the board utilize the folks in this room that are really eager to participate in this process, and other teachers that are outside of this room and teachers that are my colleagues that are quite far away from here as advocates in the future for the Keiki of Hawaii and for schools of Hawaii. So mahalo again for allowing me to be here today and to speak in front of you all. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Whiting? Okay, thank you.
Next testifier is Eileen Rocco.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Okay, hi, my name is Eileen Rocco and I'm a senior at Milani High School, and I'm in strong support in the SPED number, schools that our Keiki deserve. And for me, it mostly becomes on the topic of standardized testing. I actually come from a background of a lot of different schooling. I've been in private schooling, public schooling, online schooling, homeschooling, and I've been in the mainland and also here. And so I've taken standardized testing my whole life. And personally, I know that I do very well in it. However, now as a senior, I tutor kids from kindergarten to my peer level. And whenever standardized testing season comes around, SPED, HSA, you name it, there's a million of them. I come with students into my tutoring sessions with numbers over their heads. They say, I have a Lexile score 600 below the bar. I need to be there like by the end of the month. And their teacher, their parents are sending them in and whatnot, and they come very depressed with that number over their heads, and they understand what it means. But a lot of times that their progression in improving that is blockaded by their own mentalities. And I believe that this should not be something that we are integrating into our students, this mentality of scores and whatnot, because a lot of them do not actually see the relationship, what this has to them as a person. They know that it is an assessment of their intellect and whatnot, but as we have previously testified, mostly it is used to rank schools in terms of schools are ranked competitively, and then therefore then they are kind of punished by that. Then the schools are monitored and whatnot, looking at their educational system, and kids see that as kind of obsolete and whatnot. I have sat in classrooms where my teachers and my peers alike have all agreed unanimously that we do not need this test, and this test is something that we do not actually like, and so we just kind of force feed it down. In this situation, which I have seen in pretty much every classroom I have been in, which we've discussed this test, teachers take two options. They either deviate away from what the board wants, and they decide, we do not want this test. I'm going to teach you what I want to teach you. I want to teach you what my curriculum designs. And teachers that force feed it down the students' throats, force feed it down their throats, and teach to the test. And that, I think, is a discernment of teachers that understand what success is and what success isn't. Success is not defined by a number that a student sees himself to achieving. Success is not defined by something that is really defined by only that something that ranks school and whatnot. Success is something like that we've talked about with the HSTA, which is, it may even be vocational, it may be college prep, it may not be college prep, but either way it is not defined by a score, which is only for high stakes for ranking schools. And so, all in all, I hope that you do support this bill because it opens a lot of communication between that understanding that teachers have and that students have and whatnot. And I hope that it becomes articulated with the board. So thank you for listening.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Rocco? I guess not. Thank you though for coming.
Next testifier is Rebecca Hadley Schlosser.
Good job.
Getting better, right?
Schlosser always gets to everybody, so.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Rebecca Hadley Schlosser, and I'm a special education teacher at my edu elementary. I don't know why that goes. I've been out there for 18 of the last 19 years. Last year I spent a year at OSIS as a SPED RT. Decided it was a little less stressful to go back into the classroom. When I started at my ED 19 years ago, I was in a portable classroom. No air conditioning, maybe 3 fans that blew hot air around. It got to over 100 degrees in that classroom. We now have AC, but guess what? It doesn't work correctly. So it gets up to 90 or higher in the classrooms this year. I mean, July through December, I was walking around with a rag, and my kids were like, Miss Hadley, there's your sweat rag. Because I'd leave it sitting somewhere. Get your rag, because I'm dripping sweat. And they're dripping sweat. And I teach 6th grade this year. I'm a special ed teacher. I've taught, that's all I've taught is special ed. Nearly every week this year, we've had mandates coming down. Our principal has said, oh, you need to develop this formative assessment for this particular activity. We don't even have time to teach. We're doing so much assessing, but no teaching. And that's not fair. My students suffer. My kids, yesterday, for the hour and a half I had them for reading, and they read 3 articles that they had to answer 3 questions on each one. And the 3rd one on each one was to write a paragraph paper of 3 to 5 paragraphs. I got 1 sentence from several of these kids. And these are not, most of these kids are not special ed kids. These are gen ed kids who are placed in my groups because they are low performing students. It is not fair to these students to have to do this constantly. I have no time to teach. I currently have a caseload of 24 students that are all on IEPs. Guess what? 6 of them are actually my 6th grade students. The rest are from 2 other teachers who are no longer at our school. We had our 1st grade SPED teacher quit the week before school started. We have a substitute teacher in that classroom now. She's not qualified, she's not a teacher, she's a sub. So guess what? 3 of us were asked. Here on top of your caseload, now you get 1st graders. My schedule, I have no time whatsoever to go see these students. I had to take part of my articulation day last Friday and go observe my 1st grader, just so I could see how they were doing in class. And it's very rare that I get time to do that. My principal has been lucky that I've been lucky that she's actually given me the time this year to have a sub day where I can do my special ed job, because my teaching job, I have groups from 8 o'clock in the morning until 2 o'clock in the afternoon. There's no time to do my job. And it's not fair to my students. We're testing starting in April. I'm covering for the fully self-contained special ed teacher. She's got 14 kids. 6 of those kids are taking the alternative assessment. That means I've got at least 6 days of testing that I won't be in my classroom with my special ed kids, my 6th graders, because I have to do those tests. Plus, we've got 3rd through 6th grade taking the test, and I've got 12 students that I have to cover and figure out how I'm going to test these kids. Which means that when my 6th graders aren't taking the test, I have to figure out a way to get the other 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders that are in the FSC class tested. without interrupting the education of my other students. And unfortunately, I think that's going to end up having to be where I have a month of I'm not teaching, I'm testing. And that's not fair to me. I've got 6 kids right now going through re-evaluation. I have to do all of their testing, other than their the academic stuff that's done and the IQ. But I have to do the grade assessment, which is a reading comprehension assessment that we're required to do. I have to do any other information that I need to get for these students. And I don't have time within my teaching day to do that, which is part of my contract. So I really wish that you would support this bill so that we can make sure that other teachers don't experience what I'm experiencing this year. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Schlosser? Thank you.
Next testifier is Julie Patton.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. This is my actual second time speaking before the board. I got in trouble the last time because I didn't ask permission of my principal. I didn't ask this time either, so we'll see what happens. My name's Julie Patton, and I've been a teacher in the DOE for more than 25 years. I'm in support of the HSTA omnibus bill called Schools Are Cake You Deserve. It has many important components, but the one that's most important to my 25 third graders is the section on testing. I consider teaching to be a gift of heart, backed up by education, patience, and perseverance. I've been working hard over the past 25 years to hone my craft through getting my master's in curriculum and instruction and continuing to read and do research on education issues. This year, instead of teaching my students how to transition from learning to read to reading to learn, I will administer hours of practice testing for the SBA. Instead of teaching them to master multiplication, division, and fractions, I will be testing them to prepare to test them. I used to spend my afternoons teaching social studies, science, art, music, health, and technology, all things on their report card. Now I spend my time doing something called triage. I have to test my students and decide whether they're able to pass the test, need more help to pass the test, or have no chance of passing the test. Once I've tagged them green, red, and black, then I send my red tags to someone else so they can infuse them with magical test-taking ability, while I try to do the same with the rest of my students. A few weeks ago, I wanted to teach my students about Chinese New Year as a culminating activity. We were going to make char siu bao. I had to make a decision to put aside triage to let my children learn about a part of their culture. This could have got me in trouble because I was not doing what my principal instructed me, which is to teach reading and math all day long. As a third grade teacher, I should not have to put aside all the subjects that help make our children well-rounded, happy learners to teach a test. 8- and 9-year-olds should not be put through this needless testing. Students should not have to be tested 4 years in a row in elementary school. Please support Keki's School Our Cake You Deserve and help get rid of this toxic testing. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Patton? Okay, thank you.
Next testifier is Chris Caulfield.
Good afternoon.
Hello, Chair, Board members. Hello, Superintendent. It's always good to speak with you. I'm Chris Caulfield, representing the MUA Alliance, speaking in strong support of the legislative measures being considered before the Board of Education today. In full disclosure, I'm also a government relations consultant to HSTA, who's been involved with the crafting of these proposals. As we speak, we are awaiting word on whether or not these bills will be heard by the Senate Committee on Ways and Means, and will move forward this legislative session. Regardless of whether or not these bills pass the Senate, however, it is imperative that the Board take a strong stance in support of